If walking were truly enough after 50, strength wouldn't fade in people who walk every day. Balance wouldn't quietly slip, and bones wouldn't thin despite thousands of faithful steps. Yet science shows that the aging body listens not to motion alone, but to challenge. Walking keeps the heart moving and the mind calm. But after midlife, the body begins asking a deeper question. Are these muscles still needed? Are these bones still under demand? Is this nervous system still being tested? Without varied stress, the biology of survival slowly shifts from building to conserving. Not because we stopped caring for the body, but because we stopped asking it to adapt. After the age of 50, the body enters a quieter phase of negotiation with itself, one where muscle is no longer treated as a long-term investment unless it is clearly required. Muscle tissue is metabolically expensive, and the body is always balancing survival efficiency against available demand. Walking keeps muscles moving, but it does not create enough mechanical tension to convince the nervous system and the endocrine system that these fibers are essential. As a result, the body begins to reduce what it perceives as excess capacity, not abruptly, but gradually, year after year, in a process that often goes unnoticed until everyday tasks feel heavier than they once did. This loss does not happen because of laziness or failure, but because biology is responsive, not sentimental. Muscle cells rely on signals created by resistance and load to maintain their structure. Without those signals, protein synthesis slows and breakdown quietly accelerates. Walking engages primarily the same low threshold muscle fibers over and over. Fibers designed for endurance rather than strength. These fibers are excellent for long-distance survival, but they do not protect against the shrinking of fast-twitch fibers that provide power, stability, and the ability to recover from sudden demands such as catching a fall or lifting an unexpected weight. Hormonal changes amplify this shift. After 50, levels of anabolic hormones gradually decline, reducing the body's natural drive to rebuild muscle tissue. In earlier years, casual activity could offset this decline, but later in life, the threshold for stimulation rises. The same walk that once maintained muscle now simply preserves habit, not structure. The body becomes efficient at doing more with less, adapting to repetition by minimizing unnecessary tissue. Efficiency feels comfortable, but comfort is not the same as resilience. The nervous system also plays a central role in this process. Strength is not just a property of muscle, but of communication between brain and muscle fibers. When movements lack intensity or variation, neural pathways become less responsive. Motor units are recruited less frequently and less completely, reinforcing a pattern of underuse. Over time, the brain learns that maximum force is rarely required, and the ability to access it fades, even if the muscle tissue itself is still partially present. This is why many active people are surprised by sudden weakness. They have not stopped moving, but they have stopped signaling necessity. Muscles that are not challenged are not prioritized, and muscles that are not prioritized slowly disappear. Walking remains valuable for circulation, mood, and joint lubrication, but it speaks a biological language of maintenance, not preservation of strength. After 50, the body does not respond to intention, routine, or good habits alone. It responds to demand, to stress that is meaningful, intentional, and progressive, reminding the body that strength is not a luxury, but a requirement for survival. This gradual retreat of muscle has deeper consequences than appearance or lifting capacity. Muscle acts as a metabolic reservoir, a place where glucose is stored, hormones are regulated, and inflammatory signals are buffered. As muscle mass declines, blood sugar control becomes less stable, fatigue arrives sooner, and recovery slows. Walking supports circulation, but it does not sufficiently activate this reservoir. The body adapts by downsizing its metabolic infrastructure, which subtly reshapes energy levels and endurance in daily life. There is also an emotional dimension to this biological shift. Strength is closely tied to confidence, autonomy, and the sense of physical safety. When muscles weaken, movements become cautious. The body begins to anticipate limits, and the mind follows. This feedback loop reinforces smaller movements, shorter ranges, and less force, further confirming to the nervous system that strength is no longer required. What begins as a cellular adjustment gradually becomes a behavioral one. Importantly, this process is reversible far longer than most people believe. Muscle cells retain memory. Even after years of underuse, they respond quickly when given a clear signal of demand. Resistance does not need to be extreme or punishing. It simply needs to be intentional enough to tell the body that these tissues are still necessary for survival. The biology of aging is not opposed to strength. It is indifferent to it, until convinced otherwise. Walking, in this context, becomes a foundation rather than a solution. It keeps the system alive, but it does not ask the system to grow. After 50, growth no longer happens by accident. It must be invited. When the body senses challenge, it reallocates resources, reactivates dormant pathways, and restores function that seemed lost. This is not about fighting age, but about communicating clearly with biology, reminding it that capacity, stability, and strength are still part of the story. Bones are often described as rigid structures, but biologically they are alive, listening, and constantly rewriting themselves based on the forces placed upon them. After 50, this conversation between bone and load becomes more fragile, not because bones suddenly forget how to grow, but because the signals they rely on grow quieter. Walking creates repetition, rhythm, and comfort. Yet comfort is not the language bones understand best. Bones respond to impact, to changes in direction, to compression, and release that tell the body these structures are still essential for survival. Throughout life, bone tissue is renewed through a balance of breakdown and rebuilding. Specialized cells remove old or damaged bone, while others lay down new mineralized structure. In younger years, this balance favors rebuilding, even with modest daily activity. After midlife, hormonal shifts change that balance, tipping it slightly toward loss. Estrogen and testosterone both play protective roles in bone density, and as their influence declines, bones require clearer mechanical instructions to maintain their strength. Walking, while valuable for many systems, delivers a signal that is too uniform, too gentle, and too predictable to fully activate bone-building pathways. The skeleton evolved in an environment that demanded variety. Our ancestors climbed, carried, stumbled, twisted, and absorbed force from uneven terrain. Each of these actions created microstresses within bone tissue, small enough to be safe, but strong enough to trigger adaptation. These stresses told the skeleton where reinforcement was needed. Modern walking, often done on flat, forgiving surfaces with supportive footwear, removes much of that informational richness. The bones experience movement, but not challenge. Motion without meaningful demand. As bone density slowly declines, the change is invisible. There is no pain signal, no fatigue, no early warning sensation. Bone loss is silent because the nervous system does not monitor bone strength directly. By the time weakness is discovered, it is often after a fracture, when the system has already crossed a threshold. This is why walking can feel deceptively sufficient. A person may walk daily, feel mobile and independent, yet carry a skeleton that has been quietly thinning for years. Load is the key signal bones respond to, but not all load is equal. Bones respond best to forces that are brief, directional, and varied. Lifting, stepping sideways, rising from the ground, gentle jumping, or controlled impact all create patterns of stress that stimulate bone-forming cells. Walking distributes force evenly and predictably, which allows the skeleton to adapt by becoming more efficient rather than stronger. efficiency reduces excess structure, and after 50, the body often interprets efficiency as safety. There is also a relationship between bone strength and muscle strength that cannot be separated. Muscles pull on bones, and this pulling is one of the strongest signals bones receive. When muscle strength declines, bones lose an important source of stimulation. Walking activates muscles, but it does not require them to generate high force. Without strong muscular contractions, bones are deprived of one of their primary reasons to remain dense. The weakening of bone and muscle thus becomes a shared story, each reinforcing the other's decline. Psychologically, bone fragility changes behavior long before it changes awareness. Subtle fear of falling leads to smaller steps, reduced stride length, and avoidance of unfamiliar terrain. These adjustments feel protective, but they further reduce skeletal loading. The body enters a loop of caution, where reduced confidence leads to reduced challenge, and reduced challenge accelerates physical decline. This loop is not caused by aging itself, but by a mismatch between what the body needs and what it is being asked to do. Importantly, bones retain the ability to respond to challenge well into later life. Bone-forming cells do not disappear with age. They become less responsive to weak signals. When stronger, more varied forces are introduced safely and progressively, bones respond by reinforcing vulnerable areas. This adaptation does not happen overnight, but it does happen reliably. The skeleton is conservative but not stubborn. It simply waits for evidence that strength is still required. Walking remains a valuable practice for circulation, joint nutrition, and emotional regulation. But it does not provide the mechanical conversation bones need after 50. Bone health is not maintained by movement alone, but by meaningful stress, by reminding the skeleton that it is still part of a dynamic, unpredictable world. When bones sense purpose, they respond with structure, density, and quiet strength that supports the body from the inside out. Balance is often assumed to be something we either have or lose. But biologically, it is a living skill, continuously shaped by the information the nervous system receives. After the age of 50, this system becomes more selective, not weaker by default, but less stimulated by repetitive, predictable movement. Walking feels stable and familiar, which is exactly why it fails to train balance deeply. True balance emerges from uncertainty, from the body learning how to respond when stability is briefly threatened and then restored. The brain maintains balance by integrating signals from the eyes, the inner ear, and specialized sensors in muscles and joints that report position and movement. This integration happens constantly, but it improves only when it is challenged. When movement patterns remain the same day after day, the brain reduces the resources devoted to refining these signals. Walking on flat ground with a consistent pace provides reassurance, not stimulation. The nervous system interprets this as a low-risk environment and adjusts accordingly. With age, reaction time slows slightly, not because neurons fail, but because unused pathways become less efficient. Balance depends on speed as much as strength. When the body slips or stumbles, the brain has milliseconds to respond. If those responses are rarely practiced, the system hesitates. This hesitation is not noticeable in daily walking, but it becomes critical during unexpected moments, when a quick correction determines whether a person recovers or falls. There is also a subtle loss of sensory richness after midlife. Joint receptors become less sensitive, especially in the ankles, hips, and spine. These receptors inform the brain about joint angle and pressure, acting like an internal map of the body in space. Walking uses a narrow range of motion and consistent joint angles, which means these sensors are not fully engaged. Over time, the brain receives less detailed feedback and updates its internal map with less precision. Fear plays an unspoken role in this process. As people age, They often become more cautious, avoiding movements that feel unstable. This avoidance is understandable, but it deprives the nervous system of learning opportunities. Balance improves not by avoiding instability, but by encountering it in safe, controlled ways. When instability is never practiced, the brain interprets it as dangerous, reinforcing protective stiffness and slower responses. Muscle strength and balance are intertwined, but they are not the same. Strong muscles can fail to prevent a fall if they are not coordinated quickly. Balance requires timing, sequencing, and communication across multiple muscle groups. Walking strengthens coordination in a single forward pattern, but life demands multi-directional responses. Reaching, turning, stepping sideways, and recovering from awkward positions all require balance strategies that walking alone does not teach. As balance confidence declines, movement becomes more restricted. Steps become shorter, posture more rigid, and the center of gravity less mobile. These changes feel stabilizing, but they actually reduce the body's ability to recover from perturbations. A rigid system breaks more easily than a flexible one. The nervous system needs exposure to controlled challenge to remain adaptable. What makes balance especially important after 50 is that falls are rarely caused by weakness alone. They are often the result of delayed reactions, misjudged spacing, or sensory confusion. These are neurological issues, not character flaws. When balance training is absent, the brain loses fluency in managing sudden changes. Walking maintains movement, but it does not maintain readiness. The encouraging truth is that the nervous system remains plastic throughout life. Balance improves at any age when the brain is given novel, slightly challenging tasks. Standing on one leg, changing surfaces, moving in different directions, and practicing controlled instability all sharpen neural pathways. These practices teach the brain to expect variation rather than fear. Walking keeps the body moving through space, but balance training teaches the body how to stay upright when space becomes unpredictable. After 50, stability is not preserved by staying safe, but by staying adaptable, reminding the nervous system that it is still capable of learning, adjusting, and responding with confidence in a world that is never perfectly flat. After the age of 50, the body's relationship with energy quietly changes, not because movement stops, but because the signals that regulate metabolism grow more selective. Walking burns calories, yet calorie burning is only a small part of metabolic health. What matters more is how the body decides where to store energy, how efficiently it uses fuel, and whether it prioritizes maintenance or renewal. As we age, the body becomes protective, favoring conservation over rebuilding unless given a clear reason to do otherwise. Muscle tissue plays a central role in this decision-making process. Muscles are not just engines of movement. They are metabolic organs that regulate glucose uptake and influence insulin sensitivity. When muscle mass declines, the body's ability to manage blood sugar weakens, even in people who walk regularly. Walking activates muscles at a low intensity, which supports circulation, but does not strongly engage the pathways that improve insulin responsiveness. Over time, the body adapts by becoming more efficient at storing energy rather than using it dynamically. Inside each muscle cell are mitochondria, tiny structures responsible for converting nutrients into usable energy. With age, mitochondrial number and efficiency can decline, contributing to fatigue and slower recovery. Walking supports baseline mitochondrial function, but it does not strongly stimulate the creation of new mitochondria. Higher intensity or strength-based movements send a different signal, one that encourages renewal and adaptation. Without that signal, the body maintains what it has, but does not expand capacity. There is also a hormonal dimension to metabolic change after midlife. Stress hormones tend to rise, while anabolic signals that promote tissue repair decline. This hormonal environment encourages the body to conserve resources and protect energy stores. Walking is calming and beneficial for stress regulation, but it does not sufficiently counterbalance the decline in anabolic stimulation. The result is a metabolism that becomes cautious, prioritizing survival efficiency over resilience. Fatigue after 50 is often misunderstood as a lack of motivation or willpower, but it is frequently a reflection of metabolic signaling. When the body senses limited capacity, it reduces spontaneous activity and recovery speed. This creates a subtle cycle where people move less intensely because they feel tired, and feel tired because their metabolism is no longer being challenged to adapt. Walking sustains routine, but it rarely disrupts this cycle. Short bursts of intensity and resistance-based movement have a unique metabolic impact. They increase insulin sensitivity, stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis, and improve the body's ability to switch between fuel sources. These effects are not about burning more calories in the moment, but about improving how the body handles energy long after movement stops. Without these signals, the metabolism becomes less flexible, relying more heavily on glucose and storing excess energy as fat. Psychologically, this metabolic shift can feel discouraging. People often believe they are doing everything right. Walking consistently, eating carefully, yet noticing weight gain, reduced stamina, or prolonged soreness. This disconnect can erode confidence and lead to resignation. In reality, the body is responding logically to the signals it receives. It is not resisting health. It is following instructions that no longer match its needs. What makes metabolism after 50 unique is that adaptation still occurs, but the threshold for change is higher. The body listens carefully and responds conservatively. When movement includes strength, intensity, and variation, the metabolic system reawakens. Energy production improves, fatigue diminishes, and recovery becomes more efficient. Walking remains a valuable foundation, supporting cardiovascular health and emotional well-being. But it does not fully engage the metabolic machinery required for long-term vitality. The human body evolved to handle fluctuation, effort, and recovery. Metabolism thrives on challenge, not constant ease. After 50, energy is not lost because the body is failing, but because it is waiting for a clearer signal that renewal is still necessary. When that signal arrives, the system responds, not with youth, but with efficiency, resilience, and renewed capacity to support an active life. The human body is not designed to thrive on repetition alone, especially after the age of 50, when biological systems become more selective about what they maintain. Variety is not a luxury in movement. It is a signal of relevance. When the body encounters different demands, it interprets them as proof that adaptability is still required. Walking, while beneficial, delivers a narrow message. It tells the body that forward motion is needed, but it does not communicate the full range of challenges that once defined survival. For most of human history, movement was unpredictable. People lifted uneven loads, climbed irregular surfaces, twisted to reach, squatted to rest, and adapted constantly to changing environments. This diversity trained not just muscles and bones, but the nervous system, connective tissue, and cardiovascular responses. Each new demand reinforced the idea that the body needed to remain versatile. Modern life, combined with repetitive exercise habits, removes much of this informational richness. After 50, the body begins to prune what it no longer perceives as necessary. This pruning is efficient and logical. Systems that are not used frequently lose priority. When movement lacks variety, certain ranges of motion, coordination patterns, and strength capacities fade quietly. Flexibility narrows, reaction options shrink, and the body becomes excellent at a few tasks while losing resilience across many others. Connective tissue illustrates this clearly. Tendons, ligaments, and fascia adapt to the directions and speeds they experience. Walking loads these tissues in predictable ways, but life rarely moves in straight lines. Reaching quickly, turning suddenly, or changing direction requires elasticity and coordination that only varied movement preserves. Without it, tissues stiffen not because of age, but because of limited instruction. The nervous system also depends on novelty to remain sharp. Learning new movement patterns strengthens neural connections and improves coordination between brain and body. Repetition reinforces efficiency, but novelty builds capacity. After 50, when learning is often underestimated, introducing new physical challenges stimulates cognitive engagement as well as physical adaptation. The brain thrives when it must solve movement problems, adjusting timing, balance, and force. Emotionally, variety restores a sense of agency. Repetitive routines can quietly signal limitation, reinforcing the belief that the body is fragile or declining. Exploring new forms of movement challenges that narrative. Each new skill learned, each unfamiliar motion mastered, sends a message of capability. This psychological reinforcement feeds back into physiology, improving confidence, posture, and willingness to engage with the world. Variety also protects against overuse and stagnation. Repeating the same movement pattern stresses the same tissues repeatedly, while leaving others underprepared. Diverse movement distributes load, reduces wear, and creates balance across systems. This balance is especially important after midlife, when recovery is slower and imbalances accumulate more easily. Adaptability is the true marker of functional health. It is the ability to respond when conditions change, when the unexpected occurs, when the body must improvise. Walking supports endurance, but adaptability requires exploration. It requires moving in different planes, at different speeds, with different intentions. This exploration keeps the body curious and responsive rather than cautious and constrained. The body does not resist aging. It responds to information. When information becomes limited, the body simplifies. When information expands, the body organizes itself to meet demand. After 50, health is no longer about maintaining comfort, but about maintaining options. Variety keeps those options alive, reminding the body that it still belongs to a dynamic world, capable of meeting it from many angles rather than just one.